You.
Yeah. Okay, let's carry on, and then we can have a few more questions very soon. So these are some of the qualities, on how we decide whether something is right, something should be said, some opinions should be had or not. Then what comes next? Student, there are these 5 hindrances. What 5? The hindrance of sensual desire, hindrance of ill will, hindrance of dullness and drowsiness, the hindrance of restlessness and remorse, and the hindrance of doubt. These are the 5 hindrances. Pokarasati is veiled, shrouded, covered and engulfed by these 5 hindrances. It is quite impossible for him to know or see or realize any superhuman quality or distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. So the Buddha is here kind of, showing various ways in which Pokarasati has got it wrong. He hasn't really reflected properly, he hasn't thought about things properly, and one of the reasons why he hasn't done that is because of the hindrances. He's showing this from many different ways. So these hindrances are what stop us from achieving anything on the Buddhist path that is truly worthwhile, any of the superhuman qualities, if you like. Hindrances are to be overcome. And so you can say that the purpose of the Noble Eightfold Path is to overcome defilements, overcome the hindrance. This is what the path really is about. And it then issues in samadhi. When you overcome this fully, samadhi being the last factor is a consequence of that. And so this is why one very nice word for the Noble Eightfold Path is the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification. Because this is what the path does. It purifies us stage by stage by stage until you overcome those 5 hindrances, and then you can enter samadhi. Then you can know and see according to reality. You can have superhuman qualities. If you want to become Superman or Superwoman, this is what you have to do. So if you don't have to go to the movies anymore, you can be that Superman yourself. And you can also have this thing called the distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. It's a nice word, isn't it? Distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. Allang Arya Jnana Dasana Visesa. One of the really nice things about this is a distinction. Distinction means something special, right? If you have a distinction in a degree, it's like a special degree, PhD with distinction. Is that what you're going for, Venerable Dhammapiya? PhD with distinction? No? Okay. So, what is interesting about this, that these distinction in knowledge and vision in the suttas are defined as the 4 stages of awakening, plus the 4 jhanas. These are the distinction in knowledge and vision. Now, so the 4 jhanas are a distinction in knowledge and vision. Isn't that kind of very interesting? I thought jhana was just samadhi. It was just samatha. What's it got to do with knowledge and vision? No, the Buddha says that the jhanas are a distinction in knowledge and vision. And this gives you, again, back to this idea that there is no separation in the suttas really between vipassana and samatha. The two always go together. If you have samatha, you have vipassana. If you have real vipassana, you have samatha. Wisdom and stillness go hand in hand. So the jhanas themselves are a distinction in knowledge and vision. Knowledge and vision doesn't just mean insight or vipassana, it actually also incorporates all the samadhi on the path. And this is one of those very interesting things about this. You find it in the suttas, that these actually are a special insight in their own right. Because when you come into the jhana states, they bring with them a data that you then use for insight. That, first of all, they already themselves prove that you have given up a lot, that you already have a lot of insight. Moreover, they add to the data that enables you to get even more insight as a consequence. So they are knowledge and visions in their own right, according to this particular phrase that we see everywhere in the suttas. So I just wanted to make that point, because it's a kind of an interesting point. So many of these obvious things are often not mentioned. Yeah, you may never have heard this before. Maybe I have mentioned it here before. I probably have, but now I'm saying it again, just for good measure. But it's there. Yeah, these are kind of very, very obvious things once you know where to look. Anyway, so Pokarasati has these 5 hindrances. That's why he cannot possibly have these things. These things are not attainable. This knowledge and vision, the superhuman qualities, don't exist for someone who is veiled by the 5 hindrances. There are these 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. What 5? The sights known by the eye that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. There are sounds known by the ears, smells known by the nose, taste known by the tongue, touches known by the body, that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. These are the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. Pokarasati enjoys himself with these 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. He is tied, infatuated, attached, blind to the drawbacks, not understanding the escape. Nisarana Adasavi, or something like that. I'm not sure what the Pali is. It is quite impossible for him to know and see or realize a superhuman quality, a distinction and knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. Again, you see here the 5 kinds of sensual pleasure in the world through the 5 senses. These are opposed to deep meditation. This is why we have things like the 8 precepts. The 8 precepts is, in a sense, a restraint from the 5 senses of the world. Not eating in the afternoon and these kind of things. The 8 precepts. So the 8 precepts actually lead you in that direction. And so this is why we don't indulge in the 5 senses. We're not too ascetic either, because being too ascetic has the opposite problem. If you are too ascetic, then you have pain through the 5 senses. And if you have pain through the 5 senses, again, they are important. And then you are attached again, but you are attached in the negative way because they are painful. And that's just why the middle way is neither asceticism nor indulgence, but the way where you are just satisfied. You just eat enough. Things are going well without indulging in these things. That is the middle way the Buddha is talking about. And then when you go beyond the 5 senses, the 5 senses are no longer important. That is where meditation becomes possible. That is where the breath becomes strong in meditation. That is where you are able to go beyond the 5 sense world. But if you are attached to the 5 senses, then by definition you are not able to go beyond them. Attachment means that you are holding on. How can you let go of that which you are holding on to? You can't hold on and let go at the same time. You have to do one or the other. So if you are enjoying and kind of indulging in these things, that means you are attached. Because you're attached, you cannot let go by definition. And so to be able to let go, we have to let go of that indulgence. That is why sometimes you hear people say, I want to both enjoy myself and I want deep meditation. Good luck. It's impossible. It's an oxymoron. People don't understand what they're talking about. And this is the problem here. Of course, you can have a little bit of meditation and enjoy the 5 senses, but you cannot have these superhuman qualities. What do you think, student? Which would have better flames, color, and radiance? The fire that depends on grass and logs as fuel, or one that does not? If it were possible for a fire to burn without depending on grass and logs as fuel, that would have better flames, color, and radiance. The idea here seems to be that you can have some kind of supernatural fire, that you make up with the mind or something like that. If something burns depending on grass and logs, there will be smoke, there will be all kind of things. There will not be a pure kind of fire. But if you have a kind of fire which doesn't burn with impurities, but it burns through a supernatural thing, it's a pure fire, pure color, pure radiance. That seems to be the idea here. It's a little bit unusual way of thinking, a bit difficult for us to make sense of, but that seems to be the idea. But it isn't possible except by psychic power. Rapture that depends on the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation is like a fire that depends on grass and logs as fuel. Rapture that is apart from the 5 sensual pleasures and unskillful qualities is like a fire that doesn't depend on grass and logs and fuel. So that means that the rapture you have, depending on the 5 senses, the joy that you get from the 5 sense world is like dirty. It's like it has all kinds of smoke and ashes. It's not pure. It's not a pure kind of joy. So if you want a pure kind of joy, you have to let go of all the fumes and all of these negative things to get to something that is truly pure. And that purity of rapture, which is brilliant, which is bright, which is powerful, that has all the right qualities, that is the rapture coming out of meditation practice, specifically the rapture coming out of the jhanas. So it is a much more pure, much more powerful, much more interesting kind of rapture. This is the piti that we're talking about here, that emerges out of these things, out of the real spiritual qualities. And this is why the Buddha says everywhere in the suttas that the happiness of meditation is far superior to the happiness coming out of the 5 senses. This is a kind of a standard refrain in the suttas. Then the Buddha goes on. And what is that rapture apart from sensual pleasures and unskillful qualities? It's when the mendicant, quite secluded from the 5 senses, secluded from unskillful qualities, enters and remains in the first absorption, which has rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. That is rapture that is apart from the sensual pleasures and unskillful qualities. So this is the first jhana. This is the standard way that the first jhana is explained in the suttas. So just very briefly, there's a few kind of really important points here. The first point is that secluded from sensual pleasures means secluded from the 5 senses. You can see here how you translate make a lot of difference. If I say to you secluded from sensual pleasures, well, you may not know exactly what that means. It's a bit diffuse, a bit unclear. But if I say secluded from the 5 senses, it's very clear what that means. It means that you have gone beyond the 5 senses. You are secluded from them. And so how we translate make a lot of difference in our ability to understand these teachings correctly. So I'm a little bit disappointed that Bhante Sujato translates in this way, because he knows the meaning. He knows that this means secluded from the 5 senses, but he still translates in this way. And the reason why he does that is for consistency's sake, depending on various contexts. Translating is incredibly hard. You have no idea how difficult it is to get all the words right and get everything to match up. It's actually very difficult. And so I sympathize with that, but sometimes you do need precision in some of these very important concepts in the suttas. So secluded from the 5 senses, secluded from unskillful qualities, meaning the 5 hindrances usually. And then you have this idea, the rapture and bliss born of seclusion. This is the vivekaja piti sukha, is what this is in Pali. And this is another very important point. When we talk about the jhanas, we're talking about a very particular kind of piti sukha. It's the piti sukha born of seclusion. Sometimes people say, okay, the way to know whether you have attained a jhana is you count the jhana factors. Yeah, okay, piti, sukha, ekaggata, vitakka, vichara, 5. I got vitakka, vichara, I got piti, sukha, ekaggata, yeah, it's kind of ekaggata, must be first jhana. It's not as simple as that. First of all, the 5 jhana factors only mentioned once or twice in the suttas. This is the kind of thing that is mentioned all the time, and so we should use those things that are mentioned all the time rather than using more obscure ideas of the jhanas. And one of the things that you find, for example, in the sequence of dependent liberation, which is one of the most important sequences in the suttas that show you how liberation comes about, is that you have a sequence which starts with sila, non-regret, then you have pamoja. Pamoja already means gladness. Then you have piti. So piti comes quite early on in the sequence of meditation. Then comes passaddhi, which is calm or tranquility. Then comes sukha, piti sukha. Already you haven't even got to samadhi yet. Then comes samadhi. And so the point about this is that there is a large number of degrees of joy and happiness on the path. And only when you get to that joy and happiness that is called secluded from, born of seclusion, viveka japiti sukha, only at that point have you got the particular happiness that is the first jhana. It's a particular quality of joy and happiness, a particular quality of piti sukha, not any kind of piti sukha. When we come to the second jhana in a second, it's a higher kind of piti sukha. Again, it's called the samadhija piti sukha. The piti sukha born of samadhi, born of stillness. Another degree of piti sukha. And so this is why these things are hard to interpret, because we need to take into account the suttas from various places. We need to know what to rely on, what is most important, what is the thing that the Buddha talks about all the time. And just counting jhana factors is not really sufficient to know what is going on. This is a much better way of understanding what the first absorption of jhana really is. Okay, so that is that rapture apart from sensual pleasures. Furthermore, as the placing of the mind and keeping it connected are stilled, they enter and remain in the second absorption, which has the rapture and bliss born of. Born of what? Stillness. Born of stillness. With internal clarity and mind at one, ekodibhava, without placing the mind and keeping it connected. This too is a rapture that is apart from the 5 senses and unskillful qualities. So this is the second jhana, the standard way it is described in the suttas. The piti sukha, born of stillness, born of samadhi, born of immersion he had. I don't know why he translates samadhi as immersion, but anyway, that's his choice. Don't tell him, next time he comes to KL, don't tell him that I'm kind of being so... No, it's okay. You can say whatever you like. I don't mind. He will take it in the good stride because he is a good friend of mine. So no problem. So that is the 2 jhanas, and this is what we want to achieve. This is where the Uttaramanusa Dhamma begin, and this is the thing that also Pokarasati needs to attain if he is to understand what the Buddha has understood. So this is why the Buddha brings this out in this conversation with Subha, to show him the shortcomings of Pokarasati and his teachings. So I think that is enough for now. There is there's still the sutta, we still haven't come to the Brahma Viharas. The Brahma Viharas is coming up very soon, and this is in many ways maybe the crux of what this sutta is about. Nevertheless, I don't know, I sort of enjoy this sutta. There's many kind of different aspects to it. So if you wish, we have a bit more time for questions and comments. So do you have any more? Are you all ready to fuel up with lunch, or do you have some comments and questions first? This is your chance. We have a question over there.
Thank you, Ajahn, for this sutta. Could you perhaps clarify then what's the difference of other religious practices of concentration or so-called stillness or jhana that is different from what the awakened one is implying?
Sorry, can you say that again, please? The difference between what? The difference
between the samatha practices that those who are not following according to the way the Buddha meant to be practiced. Yeah.
Okay. So what is the difference between samatha within Buddhism and outside Buddhism? Something like that. Yeah. So the difference is what is called miccha samadhi and samma samadhi. Yeah, wrong samadhi and right samadhi. And wrong samadhi is basically the same kind of samadhi, except that it has wrong view with it. And what that means, because it has wrong view with it, it means that it doesn't reach enlightenment. So samma samadhi is samadhi together with the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, which includes right view. Miccha samadhi is lacking those other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. It doesn't have a right view. And because it has a wrong view, when you get to that samadhi, then you think, yay, happiness, got to the end of the path. I have found unity with Brahma or something like that. And then you stop because you have found something so awesome and so powerful that surely there's nothing beyond this. That's kind of what happens at that point. That's the main distinction. Is that what you meant?
So Ajahn, does it mean that the sequence that they go through will be quite similar? Like there's also piti, sukha, vitaka, vichara, but without right view?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
But is there to a certain point where, like, if they reach the 4th jhana, but they just don't get enlightened, for example?
It's possible, it's possible. Mm-hmm. So that sequence that I was talking about before, you start with a sila, then you have non-regret, then you have a gladness, then you have rapture, then you have tranquility, then you have happiness, then you have samadhi, stillness. It carries on beyond stillness. After stillness comes yata bhuta nanadasana, seeing things according to reality. Now that is not going to happen unless you have some right view to begin with. Okay. So that's kind of where the sequence splits apart and goes in different direction.
That's very clear now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi Ajahn.
Hi.
I wish to seek your further clarifications when you earlier mentioned about the 5 mental states, positive mental states with sila, pamuga, I missed the second, I don't know how to pronounce and then piti, pasadi, samadhi. Yeah. Is this a sequence?
Yeah. It's a sequence.
Can you please clarify further on that?
Are you going to be here for the second part of this retreat?
Okay.
It's coming then. Yeah, we're going to go through all of those things then. But I'll tell you anyway, because some of you are not going to be there. Just to give you so the sequence is, it starts with sila. Yeah, and because you have sila, and sila here means really profound sila. Sila is morality, right? Really deep morality. Then you have no regrets. No regrets is called avipattisari in Pali. Vipattisari is remorse or regret. Because you have no regrets, you have pamudja, you have gladness, you reflect on your virtue, think, yay, I'm living well, hooray, little me doing well in this difficult world. You feel happy about yourself. Pamudja. From that pamudja, as you develop your meditation, you get piti. Piti is rapture or joy. It's a deeper kind of gladness, a deeper sense of often physically felt rapture going through the body and the mind. Take that deeper, keep on meditating. You get to tranquility, the rapture dies down, you feel the tranquility of the body and the mind. That tranquility of the body and mind leads to a more profound kind of happiness called sukha. Sukha is a deep kind of happiness, so deep, so beautiful, it draws you in completely, it's the only thing you're interested in. And so it leads to stillness, it leads to samadhi. That samadhi, because it's a state outside, beyond the 5 hindrances, allows you to see things according to reality. Yata bhuta nanadasana. Seeing things according to reality means seeing dukkha. If you see dukkha, you are repelled by dukkha. Nibbida. Your mind moves away from dukkha, from everything. Because you moves away from everything, you have no more desires. Viraga, you give up desire for the world. When you give up desire, it leads to vimutti, and vimutti nanadasana. Vimutti is liberation, freedom, what we're talking about on this retreat. And so this whole thing leads to liberation in this way. That is the dependent liberation sequence. Okay, anyone else? Okay, please. No, it's nice. It's nice to have a chance to ask as many questions as you like. So please.
Bante, you were talking about one of the 5 hindrances, the restlessness and the remorse.
Yeah.
So there has been some practices that, you go for praying and then you're asking for forgiveness, keep on chanting and all these things.
Yeah.
There's a psychological effect of remorse. I mean, it stay really deep down inside for someone who had done some very bad deeds and all these things.
Yeah.
So from what I understand is only an Arahant can eradicate restlessness and remorse at the last stage.
Yeah.
So how effective it is for us to pray, for forgiveness. That every time we say we ask for forgiveness, this and that, but it stays really deep inside the heart, the guilt feeling.
Yeah,
how to get rid of it?
Good, yeah. So I think I'm gonna give you a Pali name, something with question in it. It's nice. The one who asks wise questions, something like that. Is that good? That's a nice name. Anyway, no. Yes, it's a very important point, and it's the answer is that if you do ask forgiveness seriously, and you understand that you have made a mistake and you want to restrain yourself for the future, the Buddha says that is growth. You are growing by doing that, because you know that you have overstepped the bounds, and so it does purify you to some extent. Yeah, so absolutely ask for forgiveness. And accept that everyone makes mistakes. There's no shame in making mistakes. Sometimes we are ashamed by our mistake, but everyone else makes the same mistake. So what's the big deal, right? We think that no one else does, but actually everyone makes these mistakes all the time. And so you accept that and you ask for forgiveness. But it's also important to remember that even though you do ask for forgiveness, it doesn't usually purify you completely. There's always a remnant left that lingers for a while. And the reason why that is the case is because of the sense of self. The sense of self grasps onto these things. The sense of self says, I am responsible. Even though you are not, even though it's just cause and conditions coming together, the delusion of the self makes us feel as if we are responsible. So we reduce the problem somewhat by asking for forgiveness, but you can never really eliminate it completely, and that is why it is so important to be virtuous, so that lingering guilt and lingering remorse you have is also avoided for that reason. So the right practice is maximize your virtue, be as virtuous as you possibly can. Inevitably you will make mistakes. Then you ask for forgiveness. And these two pillars coming together is a very powerful foundation for making this whole path move forward, to avoid that remorse, to avoid that fourth hindrance. So that is my answer to you.
For soldiers to go to war, they kill, they may be a Buddhist, very virtuous, and then they were forced to kill. Then after that, they come back with a lot of psychological effect. So will praying or chanting and all these things help them in a sense to relieve them of some form of guilt?
I would. Chanting, I don't know about praying and chanting, but asking for forgiveness, yes. So ask for forgiveness. But, if you are a Buddhist, I wouldn't recommend being a soldier. It's not the best idea. I would find some other livelihood if I can. Sometimes, however, it is very hard to avoid. I remember the story. I don't know if you have heard these stories. There's a nice story about a monk at the time of Ajahn Chah, Ajahn Brahm's teacher, and that was the time of the Vietnam War. And there was lots of soldiers in Thailand, and they were sent to the front. And maybe there would be a war with Vietnam. It was very uncertain. There were communists trying to take over. Thailand never became communist, but Laos and Vietnam became communist countries, and so there was all this uncertainty going on. And so one of the monks was called up to the army. Imagine being a monk, you called the army. And then he went to Ajahn Chah, and he was, Ajahn Chah, what should I do? He was probably saying, don't worry, just stay, no need to go. That's probably what he was hoping for, right? But no, Ajahn Chah said, go to the army. And then the monk says, well, what if they ask me to shoot the enemy? And then He did not say shoot. No, he did not say that. Don't shoot. No. Ajahn Chah said, and it was kind of nice. He said, "Oh, in that case, just aim over the head of the other person. Don't aim at the person, right?" And that's kind of the thing. So if you are a Buddhist, first of all, avoid being a soldier, especially frontline. So like being a medic, a medical officer, that's fine, of course, because then you're doing something nice. But being a frontline soldier is not a good idea if you are a Buddhist. If you have to be a frontline soldier because the government tells you, then shoot above the head. Yeah? Miss on purpose, and then you are kind of on the right track. If you still, because you are stupid or whatever, end up killing people, well then ask for forgiveness, realize later on that you made a big mistake, and then maybe you can purify. You can probably purify even that if you have to. Yeah. All right, everyone. So that is enough for now. So please have a nice and enjoyable lunch.